There's a lot of dominance to talk about, not a lot of time to do it. Let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to Keys in the Kingdom, your Monday morning dose of Chiefs. I am Seth Keysor, the Chief in the North, here with you on RGR Football. We're going to be doing this every week to talk about what is hopefully as fun a game to talk about as the Chiefs just demolishing the Cardinals on Sunday. I'm exhausted. I stayed up late to write about the defense. We're going to talk about that shortly. But first, the usual house cleaning stuff. This is what we're going to be doing every week, every Monday, usually, because the Chiefs usually play on Sundays, to talk about some of the major storylines that I think are going to be kind of what dominates the news cycle, or at least should, in terms of what's important following the most recent game. Hence, Keys to the Kingdom. Plus, the first four letters of my last name are Keys. So it works out very nicely. There's so much to talk about in the Chiefs. They just dismantling the Cardinals in week one. As you know, if you're watching this, I don't know why you would watch this for the score of the game, but the Chiefs beat the Cardinals 44-21 in a game that wasn't remotely that close. Garbage time touchdowns just stress me out, drive me crazy. It's one of the reasons why more advanced stats tend to do a better job in terms of talking about how teams performed. But even advanced stats, still, they just measure yards picked up and likeliness to score and that sort of thing. So even those things at the end of the game are still going to affect those. The defense really, when the defense, you want it to close out strong, but really when you're going to focus on the defense is by the time the game got to 37-7, and it was over. And that's actually what I wrote about. We'll talk about that just a little bit. First, a couple things. There were multiple injuries to Chiefs players. Hopefully none of them are all that serious. Trent McDuffie has a hamstring issue. Trey Smith had an ankle problem or leg problem. He was trying to go during the game, but we'll see how that works because they've got a short week here. Obviously, Harrison Butker got hurt, but was able to come through with one step and drill a 50-plus yard field goal, which might have been the most impressive thing that happened in that game. Just based on hearing, Pat McAfee talk about it and just the sheer difficulty of getting the type of power you need to hit the type of field goal. That was awesome. Patrick Mahomes hurt his hand. That was one that they've talked about already. They said that he came back, X-rays came back clear. So it must have been, maybe it's some kind of sprain. It's hard to say. He obviously still played like a demigod. And then you have, I believe, Watson. One more. I knew it. Watson's having some X-rays. We'll see how he looks. He looked like he might be kind of in the rotation as the fourth receiver, maybe even above Sky Moore before getting hurt. So we'll see. But on the flip side, that did give Sky Moore a chance to get on the field. He did a lot with his one target. So that's something we'll get to shortly. So here's how I'm going to break it down. I'm going to talk about a few of the topics that I think are important, what I think is important about them, and we're going to roll right through and see if we can get this to Ryan with between 15 to 20 minutes. And hopefully I don't end up trying to wax poetic on anything that really matters. The first thing that I want to talk about is the defense. The first thing that I wrote about. Patrick Mahomes played like a demigod. We all know that. I can't wait for the All-22 to come out about that. It's one of those games that I know is going to be so much fun to review. We'll see whether it looked as good charting every snap as it did live, or we'll see if he left a few things on the table. It's hard to say. But the defense was interesting to me, and it was one of the first things that I wrote about because they succeeded in some situations where they didn't previously. And one example of that, with what I wrote about, is if you just go to the very first play of the game. Now, this was obviously, there was a penalty called on the Cardinals here. And so there's either way, this would have been technically a win for the Chiefs with an illegal shift call here. But I wrote about the Chiefs kind of playing different and succeeding differently than what they did last year in a small sample size. And it really did start with this play. This is not a super well-designed or well-executed play by the Cardinals, but it is attempting to do something that is a smart thing, at least has been previously, to do to the Chiefs defense, and that's try to stretch them out horizontally. Because generally speaking, in the past, Kyler Murray is able to turn this corner and get some yardage, but he doesn't here. And this is where this play becomes interesting to me. You see Willie Gay Jr. is initially taking on the block. He keeps his helmet flashed inside. And when Murray keeps the ball, because he has to, because the blocking's not there for a run up the middle, and again, this play was not super well executed by the Cardinals, Gay disengages, stays calm, tries to stretch things out to the edge. One of the keys here is when you are trying to set the edge, your job is to try to keep everyone inside you and force them back to the defense. Or if you can't do that, if they're a super fast player like Kyler Murray, your job is to keep them running horizontally along rather than trying to turn the corner and get vertical. Horizontal, vertical. That's the opposite there. That's your job, is to try to stretch them out as far as possible, allow guys to close in. He does that really well here, and this is one of the first changes in terms of stylistically, in terms of defending sideline to sideline. You see something different with the Chiefs yesterday than what you saw in previous years, especially last year. The second thing you saw differently, this guy right here, Nick Bolton, who was excellent all game. Just that guy is so good at football. Bolton also sees where it's coming, and watch how he closes to the sideline. Now, Gay stretches the play out, forces Kyler to get more and more horizontal here, but Bolton also closes to that sideline quickly to clean up when Gay can't quite get there with the dive, because Kyler Murray's really, really fast, guys. This play right here is the sort of play that in the past probably would have gone for 8 to 10 yards on the Chiefs defense. Here, Bolton and Gay shut it down. And just as importantly, you see Trent McDuffie being physical against the blocking up here. And you also see other defensive players on the backside closing in on it. You see Juan Thornhill closing in. You see George Karlaftis coming in from the backside here with a lot of hustle. That is a little bit different than what we saw last season when you had plays stretching from sideline to sideline. It's a big deal. There were three ways that you saw some differences: their ability to defend, play sideline to sideline, their physicality, and their tackling. And those were all things that we've been talking about all offseason as things that they wanted to address, things that they thought they had addressed. And what that did was it led to success in some key moments for them. And that's what that article that I just linked to, and you can get to it on the Chief of the North newsletter. You should subscribe, because that's where I wrote it. And basically, one of the overarching points, and I walked through it in 3 or 4 different situations, that game was a blowout, obviously, but it didn't have to be a blowout. And one of the reasons why it was a blowout, yes, the offense played great, but there were several drive situations there in which the game could have gotten a lot closer and really changed everything about the way the teams were running, the play calls that they were able to use. Some of those things a couple times while the Chiefs were leading 20-7, when they first in the first half, late in the first half, they had to punt the ball away, and then they fumbled the ball away. Those were both key moments right there that the defense had to stiffen up. And so I wrote about how they did that, what they did that was different in previous years. I also wrote about how they managed to come through several times while the offense was gaining that lead too, because you don't get to a blowout if the other team keeps scoring. There were just a couple moments where that game could have been a little bit different. The very end of the half after Juju Smith-Schuster's fumble, and when the Cardinals had an opportunity to score and get the ball back, they could turn that into a 1-score game and then gotten the ball back at the half. Very different tenor to that game. Instead, they got nothing. The Chiefs ended up with a field goal to where it was 23-7 after the half. Then the Chiefs stopped them on their first drive in the second half as well. So I broke that down drive by drive and play by play to talk about who did things. Lots of Nick Bolton stuff in there. He was super impressive, but we have to continue to move on. One thing that looked good that I'm going to need to look at with the All-22 once that comes out, the coverage on the back end looks solid. The pass rush has room to improve, but they did more than enough to get to Murray. Chris Jones talked about this after the game. They left a couple of sacks on the table, which was unfortunate. That's frustrating, but that's what happens when you play a guy like Kyler Murray. Something that I found kind of interesting in terms of snap count, and you see some of the snap counts are a little lower here because they ended up putting in kind of the second team late in the game because, again, it was a blowout. Karlaftis led the team in snaps. Highly impressive for a rookie. Looks solid on first viewing. Hopefully, I'm going to have time to get to when the All-22 comes out, I'm going to have time to chart every snap of his, given that he played the most of any rookie. I think that's a guy I'd really want to look at. And then one thing worth noting when you talk about injuries, Trent McDuffie was playing extremely well, had to come out. Jalen Watson came in and seemed to do pretty well in his stead, which would continue what I saw in preseason, which was he played really above expectations. It's also interesting that Watson is the one who came in over Williams. He does look more ready between the two of them. On the offensive side of the ball, some of the things that really caught my eye, man, we're trying to move through this. We're at 10 minutes. Let's do this. Patrick Mahomes was just unbelievable. You get to a point where you just you just can't believe you get to do this as a job. This is one of my favorite snaps of the evening. Like I said, the Cardinals should have been allowed to forfeit after this. The game was basically already over when Mahomes did this, but it's just one of those simple, stupid plays that's supposed to go for negative yardage and doesn't, because Patrick Mahomes just doesn't care about the general rules of football and how things are supposed to work. Mahomes had, at least from what I saw, and again, we're going to chart every snap just like we do every week. We're going to go through the all 22. We're going to look at accuracy versus inaccuracy, what he did within the flow of the offense, plays created, all that stuff, whether he missed any open receivers. Patrick Mahomes spent the whole evening taking what was there when it was there, winning within the confines of the offense, and then when something broke down, he made a play. It really was that perfect version of him. The Cardinals, for some God only knows what reason, decided to blitz over half the snaps. I think I saw after the game, Next Gen Stats mentioned it's the most, and I quote tweeted this, it's the most that Patrick Mahomes has been blitzed in years, or maybe even his whole career. I'm not sure what the Cardinals were thinking with that. That's gone terribly for teams in the past, and it went terribly for them here. One thing that's worth noting, there were multiple snaps where they did drop 8 and rush 3, and the Chiefs diced that up by and large as well. But it'll be interesting to see what the Chargers do Thursday night and whether or not they take any lessons from what the Cardinals spectacularly failed at doing. One thing that tells us is there was some conversation about whether or not teams were going to be able to play the Chiefs a little bit differently without Tyreek Hill, who had a good day in his own right with the Dolphins. Great player. The Chiefs succeeded without him. Doesn't change that. One thing that the people have talked about is that going to alter the way teams play the Chiefs? Are they going to be able to blitz more? Are they going to be able to play more cover one? They're going to be able to play more cover three. They're going to be able to have a single high safety, that kind of stuff. And Mahomes answered, at least in terms of a lot of the single high safety stuff and the blitz stuff, is that yes, Tyreek Hill was a huge part of dictating how teams had to play them, but it's still a pretty terrible idea to blitz, and it still doesn't really work out great when you try to play single high safety against them. But at the same time, frankly, the Cardinals tried a little bit of everything. They did play, from what best I could tell, they were playing some too high shells, and Mahomes was just finding the open guys underneath over and over and over and over, which would kind of bring us to some of the snap counts, or not the snap counts, the target allocation that you're looking at. Travis Kelce, what can you say about that guy? He's just so elite at getting open. I wrote that Simmons is going to have nightmares about him. The move that he put on him to get open here was filthy. He'd already mossed him once for a touchdown. But the way Kelce gets open here, and Simmons doesn't belong in coverage against him in space, but it's just so subtle, it's so quick, and it's so effective. Travis Kelce, he's just uncoverable. It's great to see that carrying out yet another season. He always has a tough time against Derwin James and the Chargers, so we'll see what Thursday night looks like. That's going to be a huge test for him. However, the varied Chiefs offense is going to be a different kind of test for the Chargers defense than they've seen in years past. And you kind of see that in target allocation here. One thing that kind of stood out to me, Mecole Hardman had 6 targets, which in a game where you've got the ball spread out so much, you've got 9 and 8. Juju Smith-Schuster was clearly the number 1 wide receiver with 8 targets, closely behind Kelce. But then you've got, you got 4, you got 3, you got 4, you got 6, 2, 1, 1. A bunch of guys did get targeted. This is a guy, Sky Moore, I'd like to see targeted more. I thought he looked impressive on the single target that he had, but we'll hopefully be talking more about him after Thursday's game. But it's just interesting to me, the fact that Hardman actually on a couple of Mahomes' throws that I'm sure he'd want back, because from what I didn't see anything like Hardman laying up or anything like that. There were a couple of deep shots to Mecole Hardman that were just a yard outside his reach or so, and both of them were touchdowns. And as they kind of get their timing down, and they've been playing together for multiple years, so I don't know if that's really an accurate way of viewing it, but those are a couple of deep shots that Mahomes would like back, and they still absolutely crushed them. So that's something to watch with Hardman moving forward, because he was a bigger part of the offense than I think people expected. Didn't have a huge day with it, but they did go out of their way to get him a touchdown. They did go out of their way to get him some touches, and he did have a couple of deep shot plays that were just almost right there. And one of the things about being a deep shot player is the percentage of catchable throws that are going to come your way is going to be much lower, because throws 50 yards down the field are a lot harder to complete. But they were there. The looks were there. And just as importantly for the Chiefs, with teams that they're playing, that's what's going to be on film, is that those looks were there, and really the Cardinals got lucky that didn't hurt them more. So I think that's something at least worth watching. Something else that was really great about the Cardinals game and the offense, Andy Reid was completely in his bag. And one of my favorite plays of the evening, this is something they've done before, running a mesh pick at the goal line. What you end up doing, you see that there's man coverage. You send all three receivers to the left. You send the running back the other way, and this poor linebacker, or maybe it's a safety, he's got to run through so much muck to try to get there. And you end up, you don't really have to have any of them actually pick him, because just 6 bodies end up between him and the runner. And that's how Clyde Edwards-Helaire got so wide open on that play. Andy Reid was in his bag. He played a great game. Travis Kelce played a great game. It was tough to find a poor performer among the Chiefs. The offensive line early was giving up a little more pressure than I'd like, and that's something that I'm curious about against a really talented Chargers defensive line, a talented but shallow defensive line. They're coming off a big win against the Raiders. This is going to be a fast turnaround game. I kind of like the fact that they're getting their Thursday night game out of the way this early, before injuries and weariness have kind of taken a toll and that kind of stuff. But it's going to be an important game. Something I would keep in mind, there's 2 things here. No matter what happens with the Thursday night game, maybe I'll talk more about this with the mailbag. No matter what happens, it's going to get overreacted to. Let's say the Chiefs come out and have a dominant win. People are going to freak out. Let's say the Chiefs come out and lose. People are going to freak out. Changing of the guard, new AFC West, etc. It's week 2. There are very few things in week 2 that when we come back to week 17 that are going to matter, other than, maybe playoff seeding down the stretch. And so keep that in mind as you watch that game, because there's just so much developing that every team does throughout the course of the season. Dominant week 1 win. Great to see in a lot of facets of the game. It was so much fun to watch, and it's going to be so much more fun to break down more and more. Again, check out what I've already written at the Chief North newsletter. I'm going to try to get 2 film reviews in before Thursday's game. One of them will be the Patrick Mahomes film review, and the other I'm going to try to write about George Karlaftis. We'll see how much time we have. But those are the keys to the kingdom this week. Make sure that you tune in on Thursday, obviously before the game. We're going to try to publish the mailbag, have that here, and I will tweet out for mailbag questions on Wednesday. And then obviously, if you want to go back to the comment section from last week's mailbag and throw questions in there, put a bunch of question marks behind it, I will take a look at that. It was a great game. So much fun to watch. It is a great week to be a Chiefs fan.